Welcome to The Mountain Pass, a podcast about lifelong learning, curiosity, and our wonderful brain. Topics we love at Alp Audio. But this isn't a podcast about Alp the product. Rather, it's conversations driven by our curiosity. And Twitter. And you could definitely say he has become an influencer in his field. I wanted to talk to Ramsri about all of these things that combine into what we love at Alp as well, which is NLP, AI, teaching and learning, building his own course on Udemy and then a cohort-based course on Maven, and what he's learned along the way. This was a great conversation, and I really enjoyed the way he thinks about being a content creator and a teacher on these different platforms. Enjoy. Ramsri, welcome to the Mountain Pass. It's great to have you here. I'm actually very excited to interview you based on, I think we overlap on a lot of different topics, from the creator economy to NLP, learning online, lifelong learning, all of those different things kind of merge. So it's great to have you on the Mountain Pass.
Thanks, Yosh, and it's my pleasure to be here. Very excited.
Amazing. So I figured just let's start with your background, because I don't know if everyone knows you. You are a kind of LinkedIn influencer, but let's just start with where you come from, what you're up to, and kind of get an overview, and then we'll dive into those different topics.
Absolutely. So I'm Ramsri, for those who do not know me, and currently I'm based out of Hyderabad, India. I'm primarily a lead data scientist slash builder of AI products. And for the last 7-8 years, I've been in this field after graduation. I got my master's in US and worked in the Valley for about 6 years before moving back to India, and then had a startup based out of Singapore as well. And currently I do AI freelancing as well as run a micro SaaS, Questgen.ai, and also teach NLP based courses, both cohort based as well as recorded courses on Udemy, etc. That's about me in short. And also I've grown as a content creator both on LinkedIn and Twitter a little bit over the last 1.5 years. Yeah.
Amazing. So I actually wanted to start with kind of the courses that you've learned online, because I think there's this theme that we'll be touching on throughout our chat is online learning, lifelong learning, and then teaching. So I wanted to start with your experience as someone who's taken all of these courses online, Udacity, Udemy. What do you think? What did you like about them? What did you not like about them? Yeah, let's start from there.
Absolutely. So I think the MOOC revolution began around 2011, 2012. And that's when I graduated as well with masters and bachelors around that time. So I kind of embraced the MOOC revolution right away. I would say I'm the kind of early adopter of it, simply because till then I didn't have access to like high quality content in terms of teaching, getting content from top tier institutes on certain niche topics. And that's where I found that, okay, this is great. And I absolutely love MOOCs. And also it was fueled by one other fact that I come from electrical engineering background for the most of my studies. And then I was into core AI and working on things in that. So I had to fill in gaps as well that I had coming from electrical engineering background. And the only way without going to school again was to go through like high quality MOOCs. So I'm up to speed on all of these things. So it started out with those things. And first, initially, I was more focused on just getting better at my job and performing my day-to-day duties very well. But soon I fell in love with the MOOC revolution so much that I started doing everything that's in the tech arena, from front-end development to back-end development, databases, artificial intelligence courses, again in speech, self-driving cars. So I kind of loved all of those aspects, and Udacity and Udemy and Coursera were my go-to sources. And one thing led to another, and to the point that I started envisioning AI products that I could build with the MOOC knowledge. So that led me to even move back from Silicon Valley to India, but I think we can go into that later. But that's about the MOOC revolution in short. I was kind of the early adopter and could not resist the value that's offered and could immediately embrace it. Yeah.
Amazing. I think in a lot of ways, like you are the success story of MOOCs, right? Getting
Yes.
getting access to this amazing content halfway across the world. And if someone goes into your LinkedIn profile, I think you have 5, 6, or 7 different course completion certificates in AI and data, which is amazing. And
yeah, quick thing was someone asked me and I counted. I almost finished 50 different courses, almost 40 plus with certifications and everything, like to the project completion.
Wow. So I guess just on that, because when I got out of the military, also in 2011 or 12, I started doing MOOCs in depth, many in computer programming and some in data science, and then also in economics. And I finished a lot. I almost never got the certificate because I didn't want to pay for it, or I didn't want to do the homework. I just wanted to listen. But I still loved the experience. I kind of did it before school or during school, at university. But among all of my friends, I think I was the only one who was actually tapping into MOOCs. And from the ones who did, I had a few other friends who did kind of computer sciences. I was the only one who was completing courses. So I'm just kind of curious, did you have a similar experience? And what do you think led you to complete so many courses and really get a lot of value from MOOCs?
So one thing was, it was fueled by my interest a little bit and to grow in my career. And I had some thoughts around building something on my own, not necessarily as a startup, but back then when I was 22, 23, I had some ideas of building products and getting to know the world better. And one important thing was that when I was growing up, I always remember that phase where I kind of did my schooling before the Google era. I had so many questions. Always I had to go to the library and search through all the content to find an answer or do things. So I always envisioned, if something was readily accessible for me to learn, why would I not embrace it? And that thing clicked when MOOCs came out. So that is why I think the motivation levels were also slightly better than average MOOC completion rate for like general average MOOC completion rate. And mine are way different because of that motivation as well. And simply once I started doing MOOCs, and what happened was, I could find adjacencies that I could expand into. Once you learn databases, perhaps you want to do full stack and build something else. Then once you do that, you want to understand front end a little bit. Or if you're taking like AI-based courses, if you just do computer vision, then you want to slightly expand into speech and other areas, natural language processing, text, etc. And so the way I looked at it was kind of an exploratory journey for me into MOOCs, and I could learn adjacencies and expand on them just purely because of the interest as well. So that's how I could get up to speed and also be motivated on all these MOOCs and courses. Yeah.
And do you think there was kind of personality traits that you have or that you appreciate that lent themselves to kind of getting through it?
So to a certain extent, I would say yes, in the sense that I think the basic thing, the only personality trait was curiosity, I would say, that led me to exploration so much. And a lot of MOOCs that I finished, I did not finish them for the sole purpose of showing that certificate for somebody or even getting to a higher paying job or moving another vertical, because a lot of courses that I did would not be even in the immediate adjacency even. So I did it more from an exploratory perspective and curiosity. I did MOOCs on even astronomy and learning how to learn, how does the brain learn, things like that, etc. So to certain extent, like curiosity fueled exploration, I would say that's the dominant trait. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. I think it's interesting, the MOOC journey, because there's something that doesn't jive for a lot of people, even with the curiosity, right? In terms of completing MOOCs and just the way we measure the success of a MOOC. Just kind of speaking from personal experience, I think there were many MOOCs that I took from start to finish just out of curiosity, but there were also many MOOCs that served their purpose even though I didn't complete them. And on the personalization side, very similar to university courses, a lot of them overlap in material. And there's no real personalization, and it's up to you as the learner to kind of figure out what you want to stick to, what you want to skip, what you want to dive deeper in. And there's a huge advantage, I think, in something like Coursera, where so much of the content is free and you can explore, versus a Udemy or a Udacity, where you usually have to pay up front to explore the different contents. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So, I mean, in one sense, I would say if there were any cons with MOOCs, it's the community aspect that was lacking. Of course, a lot of these Coursera and Udacity also has community forums, etc. But that part where you interact and develop friendships and lifelong professional relationships, I think that part was slightly missing. I did always feel that throughout, but I compensated with like attending meetups or some small study groups once in a while. But in one sense, I would say that's kind of what I would say if I go back and visit, I would put more emphasis on that community-based learning and growing. Yeah.
Got it. So I guess zooming all the way forward to your online course, let's talk a little bit about that. What is it? Why did you get it? Why did you start it? Who's it for? And, how did you build it?
Sure, absolutely. So my online course is titled Question Generation Using Natural Language Processing. And it has an interesting story in the sense that a lot of things, the question generation course, I also have an open source GitHub library on question generation, Questgen, and I have SAS. These three things are interlinked, and I'll tell you the story behind that in short. So back in 2018, by the end of 2018, we had closed down our previous startup because of internal differences between co-founders. And once that thing happened, what I did was to come online and talk about my journey. And since we had developed few algorithms, I wanted to put everything out in the public. So I started writing blogs. And our startup was based on automating assessments. So essentially, if you pick up any middle school textbook, at the end of every chapter, you have these questions like true or false, MCQs, etc. And essentially, question generation using NLP is the backrunning thing that powers everything. So because of that, I got interested in question generation using NLP and started developing algorithms. And once we closed down our startup, I started writing online about the things that I learned, the algorithms that I developed, And slowly I started building audience. And then me, along with few interns, created a Questgen library for question generation. It's a Python-based library, open source library. Anyone can bring in text and generate some questions, high quality MCQs, etc. And I also, since I was doing a freelancing on the side, December, almost the beginning of this year, the beginning, end of 2020, December, I was transitioning from my freelancing jobs and I had some time, 1 month or 2 months to spend things on. So I immediately realized, and also I was um, a bit cautious in the sense that I was very persistently looking to see how I can find ways to deliver value through question generation. One thing that I always imagine is that I recollect is, just like audience don't owe you attention, it's your responsibility to earn it. Similarly, just because we had Questgen open source library, it doesn't necessarily mean that we will make a direct income from it or make a living from making open source things and other related stuff. So I thought it is upon me to generate value from Questgen open source content or library. And then I immediately thought, why don't I put together a course now that I have a library and there are few people using it, and GitHub stars are continuously growing, and also there are blogs. Maybe this is a good topic for people to learn about, and that's what I thought. And I started creating question generation using NLP course almost the start of this year. And it was my first experience creating a course and recording and all that stuff as well. But I narrowed down on Udemy to begin with, and then I prepared curriculum and all the code part, collab notebooks, etc. And I took a good 1 month to kind of record very early in the morning because you have noiseless environment. And the other thing that I embraced was building in public. So even before I built the course, I told that I'm going to launch this course based on the open source library that we have. And I collected some emails. And every week, whenever I used to record, as well as the presentation slides that I have, I used to post them and tell about the launch to my social media audience. And I collected more emails from there. So right about launch, I had 250 or 300 email signups for interest in the course. And first I launched to the email list, and later I announced on social media, and then it took off from there. But that's kind of the journey behind question generation using NLP course. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So you covered a lot here, also from like the source of the content through how you produce the course, and then also to distribution.
Right.
So let's kind of zoom in on each one of those. So a lot of the content was basically from the startup, and then you had to curate it, right?
So one thing was, after the startup and before the launch of my course, I had 1 year journey with question generation. So I developed more algorithms in it with newer transformer techniques that came out in NLP. So there was journey post startup as well that I put together into the course. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. It's so helpful when you're not starting from a blank piece of paper, and you have pre-existing material. That's such a big help when you start out kind of on that journey. But I'm very curious about how a creator goes from kind of ad hoc teaching to actually creating a course. For me personally, when we started ALP, there was a lot of things that I did just kind of based on instinct or mimicking other courses. But then when I started to really explore pedagogy and learning goals and how do you structure information and memory chunks, all kinds of different things, it added another layer to how we build courses at OUT. And I'm very curious how the creator economy thinks about that.
Got it. Absolutely. So, I mean, one thing to say is that because of taking all these 40, 50 plus courses, I come from that learner perspectives of what I would want from a course. So I take that learner aspect that I draw from my experiences, and I did put together in the course that I created as well. But of course, I did not strongly follow some kind of pedagogical outline or things like that. But generally, coming to the outline, first I wanted to introduce smaller chunks of pieces and then put together all the smaller introduced chunks into a big puzzle, and we solve a big problem that is real. That was kind of my thought process. And also through the startup experience, I had one very clear thing in mind, that it need to be product-based learning. By that, I mean, all your learnings, the modules that I created, they were kind of like imagined as product features that I would build. If I build a product, then I would want to have these features. And each feature was kind of like into a module. And everything, again, if you put together, overall, it should look like a finished product that delivers value. So I use these two school of thoughts of product-based learning, as well as from the learner's perspective, whatever I wanted to teach, which is put together small bite-sized chunks and then show the big picture. So I use these two concepts when I'm creating the content of the course. And one thing is that when at launch, probably 80% of the content that I have is, I launched with 80% of what I have created. I waited for audience's feedback to get some inputs about adding a deployment section and other things. And one important thing that I always say to people is that reserve the first month of launch in adding course content, extra course content as well. Because after launch, people come out with, hey, this piece, it would have been nice if you have this. So once you hear from two, three people saying that, you go ahead and create that maybe half an hour or 1 hour more extra content, and you include that as well. That's what I did. Yeah.
Very cool. So also there's like the concept that you as a learner have been through so many courses, so it kind of gets ingrained in you. But I'd love to just, if you could explain a little bit more about the project-based learning that you did, and kind of piecing the different videos and subjects together so that people can also get to a result quickly, and then also they combine into a larger project. That sounded really interesting, and I would just love to hear like more tangibly what does it look like in your course?
Right, absolutely. So when you think about question generation or creating assessments, so there are a few aspects to it, which is what are the different kind of questions that you create. So if you take in the example that we were dealing with, Questgen.ai or our previous startup, if you pick up any middle school textbook, you have true or false questions, match the following, fill in the blank, MCQs, all these kinds of questions. So the algorithms to develop each of them kind of differ significantly in some cases, or there is some overlap at times as well. So when I thought of scheduling it, I talked about product-based learning. So first, instead of teaching even the algorithm or things like that, I would always teach it from teacher's perspective of what's the end goal of what we are creating. Kind of like the teacher would just take in the chapter text and automatically, how can we go from text content to MCQs that the teacher can give out, like a worksheet that the teacher can give out to students. So I have different sections for fill in the blanks generation, true or false question generation, and MCQs generation. And finally, I have a deployment section for each of those, as well as putting together a pipeline to go from any amount of text to some questions that you can automatically generate using this pipeline flow that I developed in Questgen. So the other aspect that I kept in mind was there's something called as Bloom's taxonomy in learning and pedagogy, where at the bottom level of Bloom's taxonomy, you have fact-based questions. And as you go higher up the level, you get to interpretation questions and questions that need reasoning and other things. So when I created a course, I took the thought process of what a teacher would want in a product that would automate his or her assessment creation. And I put together all those different modules in order to be able to deliver some kind of a suite of features put together in a product that's usable. So that was my thought process in creating. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. So I think the many teachers, the moment you mention Bloom's taxonomy, you get into this inner crowd of people who at least know what that taxonomy looks like. And
Yes.
I had that moment as well when I first discovered it, and people looked at me and said, "What do you mean? This is just like 101 for teaching. How did you not know about this?" But yeah. So what is your experience been? Because I know that this course has been out and about. So I'm just curious also to hear the feedback. And for you as a teacher, what do you think what did you implement, and what do you think is so much better in this course than kind of the courses that you've done as someone who's been involved in MOOCs since, the beginning generation?
Yeah. So with courses, I always feel it's like this, where just like sales funnel, there is a very big funnel at the top for courses that cater to basic level, probably like intro to Python or something like that. There's like huge audience. Even on Udemy, there are probably 100K plus enrolled student in courses. But as you go niche down into specific topics, which I kind of always relate back to transportation. If you want to go from one major city to another major city, there are like high-speed metros and other flying options. There's quite a lot. But the last mile connectivity is always broken because it's not a high throughput layer. And every individual has to walk their own path or find their own way to reach their home if you're talking about last mile connectivity, right? So I see that courses also cater to these two different things. One is there's intro level courses that cater to a large audience, and then there are specialized courses that cater to a specific niche that will deliver the maximum throughput to whoever is taking them. But in volume, it's not very big. And as a learner, I always felt there's this gap that the last mile connectivity, although it delivers huge delta for the individual, there aren't that many courses, specialized courses that are there. And I thought in order to both establish your own personal niche and brand, you need to deliver these specialized courses in order to be known among the crowd for expertise, right? So that's what I thought that this catered to. And like since launch, almost it's been 9 to 10 months. It's at $4,200 in revenue, and every month probably 20 enrollments or so. And so far it has about 350 enrollments in total. And through that course, it helped me in many ways. First thing was establish myself as a course creator. And now I'm launching a cohort-based course on practical introduction to NLP But this course, and it's like 4.6 star rated currently, that gave me confidence both personally that, okay, I can deliver value and I can create high value course. And also, if I'm partnered with Maven to launch the cohort based course. So for those who do not know, Udemy's co-founder and Alt MBA's co-founder Wes Cow, both of them combined and created Maven. It's a world-class platform for cohort-based courses. So in order for me to even approach them and tell them that I want to be an instructor on here, all this branding was kind of very easy for me because I have an established, well-established course with rating and that made money. I could get on these things. And also just for personal freelancing as well, it improved my branding in the sense that now people know that I delivered a high quality special niche course. So they are very, in the eyes of them, they can look at it as like a expert made course. So they know that I deliver expertise even in a freelancing, etc. So, and also I gave almost 4 or 5 talks based on the course content as well. So that helped me grow both as content creator or even establish myself in the NLP zone. Yeah.
So I think kind of the main takeaway, I mean, there are a few main takeaways, but I think what's really resonating with me is this shift of educators being kind of in the ivory tower in university to also educators being really in touch with their students and the industry. And I think one of the things that your course brings to bear is you are an entrepreneur using NLP in your products. You're a product builder. And so your approach to teaching is very hands-on. And also you're building your course with the input from your students, right? Even if it's 80% you pre-record and then 20% you're iterating on. And it's a more product-centric approach to a course, right? It's not looking as a course as this kind of book that you publish once and it just lives on the bookshelf in the library, but it's much more of a product of whose problem are you solving? How do you solve it properly? Getting feedback from your customers and then iterating constantly on your product. What's been your experience or the difference in building a course for Maven versus building a course for Udemy? Like, what is the cohort aspect change dramatically in how you teach?
Great question. So I think one aspect that I mentioned about recorded courses was the community aspect as well, right? So one thing that I realized when I'm launching course with Maven and preparing for it, as well as Maven has their own small cohort to teach how to launch cohort-based courses as well, which we have been put through as well. So one thing that I realized is that community aspect is extremely strong, that we need to foster it. So I have breakout rooms planned after in the middle of every session so that people can go into their own little Zoom rooms, ideate with each other. So my goal is to simulate the experience that you would get from a real classroom. So if you go to a classroom, sit on a bench, then you talk with your neighbors. And after 6 months, once you're coming out of that course, if it's a live classroom course, apart from the knowledge that you gain, you would have some network that you build as well as friends that you made. And my goal is to simulate that kind of experience through the cohort-based course. By that, I mean, as a creator, I am delivering value, delivering NLP value, that's half of it. And the second part is I'm facilitating people to foster relationships and form lifelong communities. And also they'll be part of like a Slack channel for a lifetime where they can interact with each other, as well as if someone joins a new job after this course, then they can get their doubts clarified, ask peers, or ask me and get some answers. So it's a whole community experience that doesn't just end after the cohort. So I always say to people that if you see the lifetime value delivered from this course, you will almost see 100x return in whatever you invest in, either through relationships, or even some people will go on to work for other companies. They would post their job requirements here, and there's a continuous cycle of recruitment as well as getting recruited. All those things happen. So I envision in the future that there will be a fostering community in NLP that will help each other in both establishing themselves into their careers, launching themselves into their careers, as well as if any of them launch products, they already have audience. So I envision all of these things to happen. Yeah.
Interesting. I think there's so much left kind of unknown about this concept of cohort-based courses, in the sense that it's definitely proven that having a community or a group of co-learners is hugely impactful for learning, right? Learning isn't inherently a solo act. I come from a Jewish background. In the Jewish kind of yeshiva learning environment, it's built around having a group learning. It's called a chavruta, and you have 3 or 4 people and you learn together. And that's like, there's almost never such thing as learning on your own. But when it comes to online communities, I just don't know if that scales. I don't know if we can maintain relationships. I don't know if the tools that are out there are built for that. And I felt more often than not that a cohort-based course, at least in the beginning when it started like a year ago, they were much more built around buying a community or buying access to influencers than actually building a community with your peers. And I think over time it's shifting towards trying to build a community with your peers that's topic based. But and I'll kind of wrap up this question with this one last anecdote, which is I used to guide trips 10 years ago. And for each trip, for each group that was 10 days together on this trip, they bonded immensely. And we always had a Facebook group. And the Facebook group was alive and kicking during those 10 days. And then for 2 weeks after those 10 days. And then it was just radio silence until today. Like, those groups never survived. And is that like, what do you think about all of that, I guess?
Very interesting point. So I would say there are a few end goals. Let's say for the example that you mentioned, the way I look at it is the end goal is to have a travel experience when they are in the trip. And I think there's quite a lot of bonding during those times. And after that, unless you really found someone very interesting, probably they would keep in touch or not. Whereas I would say when it comes to lifelong learning, especially when it is aligned with your career, you have, I would say, aligned incentives to be active for lifetime, because you always have, if you're growing, you might want to recruit other people, or if you're looking for opportunities, you want to connect to other people and be part of that their organizations. So whenever something is aligned long term with your growth, that could be either personal growth or career growth, then if you create some kind of frictionless experience for them to mingle with each other, then that will help them grow in their careers. That is what I kind of believe. And I definitely get your point of getting access to influencers. That's the main reason why some of them joined the cohort. And I look at it this way, that people who can teach great content, like technical expertise, and people who can foster communities and also be on the social aspect strong. Those two different kind of people need not necessarily overlap. And what I've seen in the recent times is, let's say, for example, I run in the future, let's say I run a cohort of 100 people. The first thing that I would do is I would recruit a community manager to foster social relationships within the community. If that's not my forte, the community manager will encourage, answer. The reason why I'm saying is, recently on Maven, we were also part of the community. And usually if it's just instructors, I would post about my course launch on Twitter or LinkedIn, and I would say, hey, I announced my course on LinkedIn. Usually if it's just other instructors, I would not get much response and other things. So my interest would die down when I'm involving in that community, and I would just stick to my social media audience. But what happened here was, since there were 3 or 4 community managers managing almost 150 people, instructors, all those 3 or 4 community managers continuously engage with everything that's kept, and they give feedback to me. Hey, great LinkedIn post, I just commented, or can you make these changes? This doesn't look very converting. So I could see an engaging and positive, welcoming process for me. And that made me motivate, even put out my small goals that, hey, I got 5 enrollments, things like that. And there's always someone to cheer up the ones who are not doing well and who are doing well as well, to just give a congratulatory thing. So what I realized was, the people who can foster communities and people who teach technical content, they need not necessarily overlap in one single person. And if that happens, it's your responsibility as a technical cohort teacher to help foster those relationships, either recruiting people who are good at that, etc. And I've seen that quite often in the recent cohorts that I've been hearing about. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I really think that last point on the teacher and the course community curator are not the same people. They're not. It's not the same job. It's not the same qualities, job description. It's just a very different skill set.
Right. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, so where do you see, just kind of wrapping up, where do you see this course going? Do you imagine teaching more courses? I know you're busy working with Questgen, and like, what do you, is this something that you found really syncs up with your daily life well, kind of as a creator, as an influencer, as someone with a large following? And is that something you want to tap into more, or like, great, you have this course, you've built it, you're happy with it, you're doing it on Maven, that's also a lot of work, and
Yeah.
let it be?
Yeah, great question, I would say. So I think the overall view of these content creation courses for me is, I love the passive income side of things. So if you take the scale of active income to passive income, at the moment, probably 80% of mine is on the active side and 20% on passive side. And as a creator, I enjoy the passive side, the freedom that comes with it, as well as my thought process is, if you have the capability to deliver 100K value to the world, you can choose to work at a company and draw 100K, or deliver 100K value to a company, or you can deliver 100K value to maybe 10,000 members and influence 10,000 members directly and make that 100K from that as well. So the way I look at it is, I'm slowly trying to shift from being active income being in the zone of active income to coming to passive income. And I did realize that I absolutely love community interactions and all that aspect as a content creator. Since I've grown on LinkedIn and a little bit on Twitter as well, I absolutely, it comes naturally to me to post content every day. I don't push myself hard at all. I random thoughts and other blog posts, etc. I create out of natural intuition that comes to me. So because of that, I do realize that this is something that I want to focus on for the next year strongly as well. So the current course that's out there, question generation, it's growing at a steady pace, and I'll let it grow. And to complement that, now I have this cohort-based course on Maven. So far, I'm at like 8 or 10 enrollments, and I think I'm kicking off next week. So I'm happy about how it turned out, and excited to teach for the next 1 month. And the interesting thing that I thought was, why don't I put this cohort-based course that I'm teaching, take the December time off, create another Udemy course, and launch it at a lower price point. So whoever cannot afford community and all the price tag that comes with it, they can go and buy the double-digit dollar course on Udemy and get all the content. And also, since I worked on multiple AI freelancing projects, I realized that I hold some specific information on certain topics, be it creating a paraphraser using NLP, etc. So in the future, I wanted to build courses on that, as well as LinkedIn growth for data scientists. That's one course that I had in mind. And the other thing was building micro SaaS with low code. That was another course idea as well. I think I need to act upon all these things depending on the interest that I get from on social media as well. But these are all the things in pipeline, and hopefully I'll deliver at least a few of them in the next year. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Love it. All right. Wow. Good luck. I love how you're going to take the content and repackage it for a lower, more accessible price tier. I think that's so smart. But if users are looking to join the cohort-based course, or if people want to take just find you on LinkedIn, hear your thoughts on Twitter, where can people find you?
So I'm on Twitter, Ramsri_Gautam. That's my ID. And on LinkedIn, if you just type Ramsri space Gautam, Goutham, you can find me there as well. Or the easiest way is just go to ramsri.ai, ramsri.ai, and you'll find all my social links, everything there about the cohort-based courses as well.
Amazing. Yeah. And we will put links to all of those in the show notes.
Thank you.
Ramsri, thank you so much for coming on the Mountain Pass. This has been fantastic.
Thanks, Yash. I think it's my pleasure to be here. It was very interesting for me to share my learnings.